You're listening to Rogue Table Talks. Here's Mike.
Okay, we are back, or should I say I am back. Mike flying solo. Chad is traveling today, otherwise occupied. It's Rogue Table Talks, number 116. You can subscribe anywhere you find podcasts, I believe, in the English-speaking world. RogueTableTalks.com. You can check us out there. If you want to send us a message, RTT at RogueTableTalks.com is an email address that we will check, well, whenever we check it, occasionally, semi-occasionally. And we'd love to hear from you if you got a question or a thought. And there's a Rogue Table Talks channel on YouTube as well. So it's Mike flying solo this week. We're kind of in sort of vacation/travel mode for the next few, as one or the other of us may be gone. So I think this might be a tad shorter. I'm pretty sure it will be a tad shorter this week. We'll see how long it is. But we're going to be talking about teach one another. We're kind of in the one another's, which is an interesting one another that I don't know if we think about this one as much or in the same way. But it is a pretty straightforward expectation or command. Colossians 3, starting in verse 14, let the word of Christ dwell among you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thanksgiving in your heart to God. So teach and admonish one another in all wisdom. So I kind of want to maybe consider that from a couple of different angles. I do think, one of the things that I'd like to think about together is this idea that we are sort of teaching each other, even if we're not attempting to teach each other or we're not consciously teaching each other. We're conveying some sort of information in a way that we expect people to respond to listen to, even to change with respect to our communication. And I think it's easy for us to kind of look at this in a big picture way, look at our culture. What does our culture teach us? What is it teaching us? How does it teach? And, there's a lot of different, perhaps, answers to that question. But one of the things, I think, one angle that's probably helpful for us to look at, because we can then begin to imitate it, is, I think culture teaches us to shame someone who has a different view, or it teaches us the value of outrage or anger or tribal positions that exclude others. And if you think that's a lot of social media interaction, or even I think increasingly, because most a lot of our news is consumed online in some way or another, and it's click based and eyeball based in its metrics. All of the incentives are set up to make you angry, or to at least potentially make you angry, have the headline in some way outrage you, even if the content isn't maybe particularly outrageous. And that's sort of something our culture teaches us all the time, and we can sort of respond in the same sort of way. Sort of this binary: good people, bad people. You're bad if you hold this position. To be good, you have to hold this position. And I wonder if the church can teach in the same way. Are we in the church? And I'm really less talking about from the pulpit, because I don't know that this is particularly what Paul is mostly talking about here. But as we interact with each other, what are we teaching each other? Are we passing along cultural outrage over, politics, election, mask, vaccine, whatever our positions might be? And is that helpful? Is that something that is, what's the intent of that? Is it to, to actually get someone to consider a different point of view? Or are we just really processing our frustrations out loud? Which it seems like that's a lot of what we all can, be involved in if we're not careful. In other words, we just mirror the culture, and the content might be slightly different, but that's the sort of, whether it's all of the things that might provoke outrage, and I could list a few. I've listed some, but whether what critical race theory or the teaching of critical race theory, whatever one thinks about that, and not that these are unimportant things. A lot of these things are pretty important, but what's our stance? What is our expectation? Is it to show I'm teaching you that I'm a good person and you're a bad person by holding this view or that view? Are we really trying to have an exchange of information that grows us in wisdom? And I think it's a lot harder. And I do think there is a tension there between saying too much or saying something in the wrong way, even if you're right, because being right is no defense for harshness or unkindness. Um, right or wrong is a whole different category. Or I don't want to be unkind or harsh, so I don't say anything, and so I don't teach, at least not consciously. And what's the middle ground there? And so one of the things that, one of the passages that I thought of um, is 1 Timothy 1, where Paul is talking to Timothy about, giving him pastoral instruction. I left you there in Ephesus, in this church, to perform these certain pastoral functions. And it starts right out, verse 3, chapter 1, verse 3. As I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus, so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine. So there's people teaching a different doctrine. So charge persons not to teach any different doctrines, comma, nor, so it's a different overlapping category, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies, which promote speculations rather than the stewardship from God that is by faith. The aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. Certain persons, by swerving from these, have wandered away into vain discussion, desiring to be teachers of the law without understanding either what they are saying or the things about which they make confident assertions. And I don't know, that seems to name something about the times that we're living in, writ large, but also in the church, that we can have, of course, wrong doctrine and teach wrong doctrine, which is, that's not a super controversial statement, that teaching wrong doctrine is bad, and we ought to be mindful of our doctrine and how we're expressing that, whether that's informally one to another, or we're, in a facilitating a small group discussion or participating in a small group discussion or teaching from a pulpit or what have you. But also, are we devoting ourselves to myths and endless genealogies? Are we promoting speculations rather than the stewardship from God that is by faith? Are we in vain discussions? Um, do we desire to be teachers of the law without really understanding what it is we're saying or the things about which we make confident assertions? And I think part of what our culture teaches us is to make confident assertions. What we don't see, and often what we don't want, is nuance, humility, hesitancy, um, the recognition that this is a complicated thing, and it isn't described simply or easily or obviously, when often that is the case for many issues of public attention. It's not super simple, that might be complicated, that we should seek to understand, that we should be quick to hear and slow to speak. Different passage from James, but similar. But instead, I think there's part of us that we enjoy going down the myths and endless genealogies um, rabbit holes, uh, and I think um, I don't know. I can't describe exactly what the draw of those things are, um, but I do think there's a number. I have a number of guesses that it might be easier to be sure or certain or have a fake certainty, or to be outraged, or um, to really live in a way in which this is really important, but at some level we know that's maybe not as important as some other things which are just difficult. Uh, One level, I know loving my neighbor, being a person of grace, um, being quick to listen and slow to speak, expressing humility are all things that are unambiguously required of me. But all that's hard. And sometimes what I'd rather do instead is devote myself to myths and endless genealogies. And there's a whole backstory about what myths and genealogies they were devoting themselves to and why. Um, but I'm not even sure that matters to us now. Whatever form that takes for us, there is a draw to being distracted by a bunch of things that seem super important, that might be super important to our culture, but are not really central to this large story, uh, that we're living in. The large story of redemption, of God's mission moving forward, of prayer and dependence and community and transformation and impact on our neighbors. Um, and the endless genealogies and myths and speculations of our day might change, but I think there is a draw in that, and that's always going to be easier than trying to be a person of wisdom and discernment and humility, and to be quick to listen and slow to speak. And so that's one of the things that probably just wrap this up here, as I'm thinking about how to land this particular plane. One of the things that I have come to a pretty firm conclusion on for my own mental and emotional health and spiritual health is, uh, I don't have to have a take on everything. I don't have to have an opinion on everything. In fact, I really shouldn't have an opinion on many things for various reasons. Either I don't have enough information, I'm not sure of the information that's available, it's none of my business, whatever it might be, that I don't need to be, I don't need to know, I don't need to have this knowledge, I don't need to have a take on this or whatever. And there's a certain amount of mental health, emotional health, spiritual health that goes along with I don't know about that. I don't need to know about that. It's none of my business. I'm going to let it go. The passage I'm thinking of there is, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is pure, whatever is godly, whatever is good, think on these things. And so to some degree, to not be concentrating on a bunch of other stuff and have to feel like you have to have a take uh, on 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 whatever it might be. um, and so as we close off our time here, what does it mean to be taught um, by those in the community? What does it mean to be taught by the Holy Spirit under the guidance of Scripture? What am I teaching those around me? And uh, what attitude do I have toward learning, towards growing in wisdom, towards passing that on to others? Is it one of humility and quick to listen and slow to speak? Um, and so that's the question I'll leave us all with. And then, do we want to be a person? The aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. And so that is our charge as well. Love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. And let that be what we express to those around us. And with that, grace and peace.
Thanks for listening to Rogue Table Talks. Be sure you're subscribed to our podcast wherever you listen and on our YouTube channel. Just search Rogue Table Talks.